What if I told you that Jesus Christ, the most famous figure in human history, spent nearly 2 decades of his life in a place the Bible never mentions? What if the Son of God walked the ancient roads of India, studied with Buddhist monks, and learned the mystical arts of the East before returning to Palestine to begin his ministry? This isn't just wild speculation. There are ancient texts, archaeological evidence, and oral traditions spanning 2 millennia that suggest Jesus of Nazareth lived in India from age 13 to 29. Today, we're diving deep into one of history's most controversial and suppressed mysteries, the lost years of Jesus Christ. But before we begin, ask yourself this. If this story is true, why has it been hidden from the world for over 2,000 years? And more importantly, what don't they want you to know? Welcome back to Myth Decoded, where we uncover the hidden truths behind history's greatest mysteries. I'm your host, and today we're tackling perhaps the most explosive religious mystery of all time. The Christian Gospels tell us about Jesus' birth and his ministry beginning around age 30. But what happened during those mysterious 17 years between his childhood visit to the temple at age 12 and his baptism by John the Baptist? The Bible is completely silent about this period, and that silence might be more telling than any words. This gap in Jesus' biography has puzzled scholars for centuries. Some dismiss it as unimportant, just a carpenter's son living quietly in Nazareth. But others believe something far more extraordinary was happening. They believe Jesus was on a spiritual journey that would take him thousands of miles from home to the mystical lands of India and Tibet. The story begins in 1887 when a Russian journalist named Nicholas Notovich was traveling through Kashmir in northern India. While recovering from a broken leg at the Hemis monastery, Buddhist monks showed him ancient manuscripts written in Tibetan. These texts spoke of a man called Saint Isa, a name strikingly similar to Jesus in Aramaic. According to these manuscripts, Saint Isa arrived in India at age 13, fleeing an arranged marriage. He spent years studying with Hindu priests, learning Sanskrit, and mastering the Vedas. The texts describe how this young Jewish teacher challenged the caste system, preached to the lower classes, and eventually clashed with the Brahmin priests who saw him as a threat to their authority. But here's where it gets really interesting. The manuscripts claim that Saint Isa then traveled north to the Himalayas, where he spent 6 years studying Buddhism with Tibetan monks. They describe him as an exceptional student who quickly mastered meditation, healing techniques, and Buddhist philosophy. When Notovich published these findings in his book, The Unknown Life of Jesus Christ, the reaction was explosive. The Vatican denounced it as heresy. Scholars attacked his credibility. The entire Christian establishment mobilized to discredit his claims. But why such a violent reaction if the story was simply false? Notovich wasn't alone in his discoveries. In the early 1900s, Swami Abhedananda, a direct disciple of the famous mystic Ramakrishna, made his own journey to the Hemis monastery. He too was shown the ancient manuscripts about Saint Isa. Not only did he confirm Notovich's account, but he also found additional texts that provided even more detail about Jesus' time in India. Then in 1922, another bombshell dropped. Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, founder of the Ahmadiyya Muslim movement, published extensive research suggesting that Jesus survived the crucifixion and traveled to Kashmir, where he lived to old age and was buried in Srinagar. The tomb, known locally as the Rosabal Shrine, is still there today and attracts pilgrims who believe it contains Jesus' remains. Archaeological evidence began mounting as well. The Hemis monastery, founded in 1630, sits on the site of a much older monastery that dates back to the 1st century CE, exactly when Jesus would have been there. Local oral traditions in Kashmir speak of a holy man called Uz Asaf, who arrived from the west, performed miracles, and taught about love and compassion. But perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from the teachings themselves. Scholars have identified striking similarities between Jesus' later teachings and Buddhist philosophy. The Sermon on the Mount, for instance, contains numerous parallels to Buddhist texts that predate Jesus by centuries. Consider these examples. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you mirrors the Buddhist principle of karma. Jesus' teachings on nonviolence and turning the other cheek echo Buddhist concepts of ahimsa. The idea of loving one's enemies is fundamental to both Christianity and Buddhism. Even the structure of Jesus' parables follows Buddhist teaching methods. So why isn't this story widely known? The answer lies in the politics of religion and power. When Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire under Constantine in the 4th century, church leaders faced a dilemma. They needed to present Jesus as uniquely divine, not as someone who learned from other religious traditions. The idea that Jesus might have studied with pagan teachers in India was completely unacceptable. During the Council of Nicaea in 325 CE, church authorities systematically eliminated gospels and texts that didn't fit their narrative. Dozens of early Christian writings were declared heretical and destroyed. Could texts describing Jesus' time in India have been among them? Fast forward to the colonial period. When European missionaries encountered Buddhism and Hinduism in Asia, they were shocked by the similarities to Christian teachings. Rather than acknowledge possible connections, they claimed that Buddhist texts had been corrupted by later Christian influence, despite archaeological evidence proving these texts predated Christianity. The British government, working closely with Christian missionaries, actively suppressed local traditions about Jesus in India. Colonial administrators were instructed to discourage pilgrimage to sites associated with Jesus' presence in Kashmir. Local legends were dismissed as native superstition. Even today, the Vatican maintains strict silence on this topic. While they've opened many historical archives, documents related to Jesus' possible travels remain classified. Independent researchers have been denied access to key manuscripts in Vatican libraries. Despite official suppression, the story refuses to die. Modern researchers continue to uncover evidence supporting Jesus' presence in India. In 1973, Professor Fida Hasnain of Kashmir University began a systematic study of local traditions about Jesus. His research, spanning decades, documented over 200 place names in Kashmir that reference Jesus or his companions. Archaeological excavations have uncovered first-century artifacts that appear to have Jewish or Christian significance. DNA analysis of hair samples from the Rosabal Shrine in Kashmir has yielded intriguing results. While not conclusive, the genetic markers show Middle Eastern ancestry consistent with someone from first-century Palestine. Linguistic evidence is equally compelling. The name Kashmir itself might derive from Kashyam, meaning the place of Isa in ancient Sanskrit. Local dialects contain words that appear to be corrupted Hebrew or Aramaic terms. German researcher Holger Kirsten spent over 20 years investigating this mystery. His book, Jesus Lived in India, presents compelling evidence from multiple sources. Buddhist texts from Central Asia describing Saint Isa, Hindu scriptures mentioning a Jewish teacher, Islamic traditions about Jesus' survival and travels, archaeological evidence from monasteries along the Silk Road. Russian explorer Nicholas Roerich, during his expeditions through Central Asia in the 1920s, encountered numerous local traditions about Jesus' presence in the region. Tibetan lamas showed him manuscripts describing Saint Isa's teachings, which closely match Christian Gospels. If Jesus did spend his formative years in India, what does this mean for Christianity? Some argue it enhances rather than diminishes Jesus' significance. Instead of appearing from nowhere with revolutionary teachings, we see a dedicated seeker who traveled thousands of miles to learn from humanity's greatest spiritual traditions. His later ministry becomes not divine revelation in isolation, but the culmination of profound spiritual study and experience. Buddhist scholars have long noted that Jesus' core message, compassion for all beings, the interconnectedness of life, and the path to enlightenment through love, perfectly aligns with Buddhist philosophy. Rather than seeing this as coincidental, they suggest Jesus was a Buddhist-trained teacher bringing Eastern wisdom to the West. The implications for modern interfaith dialogue are profound. If the world's largest religion has its roots in Eastern spirituality, it suggests all major faiths share common ground. This could revolutionize how we understand religious diversity and conflict. However, Orthodox Christianity rejects these ideas entirely. They argue that accepting Jesus' study in India would undermine the doctrine of his unique divine nature. If Jesus learned from human teachers, how can he be the one true Son of God? Today, the debate continues to rage in academic circles, religious communities, and among independent researchers. The Indian government has generally remained neutral on the question, though they've quietly supported archaeological investigations at relevant sites. Tourist authorities in Kashmir actually promote the Jesus connection, seeing it as a way to attract international visitors. Recent discoveries have added new dimensions to the mystery. In 2008, researchers announced the discovery of additional manuscripts in a monastery in Ladakh that allegedly contain more details about Saint Isa's teachings. However, these texts remain under study and haven't been fully translated or verified. Digital archaeology is also playing a role. Satellite imagery has identified numerous ancient structures along the traditional Silk Road that could have hosted traveling teachers like Jesus. Some of these sites show architectural features consistent with first-century Jewish or early Christian practices. The rise of DNA analysis has opened new possibilities for verification. Researchers are now studying genetic markers in populations along Jesus' alleged travel route, looking for evidence of Middle Eastern ancestry that could support historical claims of contact. Climate science is contributing unexpected evidence as well. Ice core samples from the Himalayas show evidence of significant travel and trade during the 1st century CE, supporting the plausibility of long-distance journeys that would have been necessary for Jesus to reach India. So what are we to make of this extraordinary claim? Did Jesus Christ really spend his lost years in India, learning from Hindu and Buddhist masters before returning to Palestine to begin his ministry? The evidence is tantalizing but not conclusive. We have ancient manuscripts, archaeological findings, linguistic connections, and theological parallels. We have local traditions spanning 2 millennia and the testimonies of respected researchers and scholars. But we also have determined opposition from religious authorities and the challenge of proving events that occurred 2,000 years ago. Perhaps the most telling evidence is the intensity of the suppression. If this story were simply false, why would it generate such powerful opposition? Why would the Vatican maintain secrecy around relevant documents? Why would colonial authorities work so hard to discourage local traditions? The truth may be that Jesus' journey to India represents something far more threatening to established religious authority than historical inaccuracy. It represents the possibility that spiritual truth isn't the monopoly of any single tradition. It suggests that the greatest teacher in Western history found wisdom in the East, and that all spiritual paths may ultimately lead to the same destination. Whether you're a devout Christian, a follower of Eastern religions, or simply someone fascinated by historical mysteries, the story of Jesus' lost years in India challenges us to think beyond the boundaries of conventional religious thinking. It invites us to consider that truth might be larger, more inclusive, and more beautiful than we've been taught to believe. What do you think? Could the most important figure in Western religion have spent his formative years in the mystical lands of the East? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more hidden histories and decoded mysteries. The truth, as they say, is out there, but sometimes you have to travel thousands of miles, both literally and figuratively, to find it.